So there are a ton of conversations right now about whether the European or the American system is better, which one produces more players, is the international game actually about to surpass the American game. And in this video, I want to cover all of that. I want to give you guys more context, more background to each system, explain the pros and cons of both, and then hopefully make a decision on which one has more potential, which one I would go with, and what you can take from each one. If you're curious about my passion and hopefully knowledge of international basketball outside of America, it's very justifiable. Most Americans do not know much at all about international basketball. But at this point, I've traveled to 35 countries for basketball. We have players come in from 30 to 40 countries around the world every single summer to train with us, to play AAU. I'm constantly talking to other coaches and players and agents who are in the trenches in European and just international basketball in general. And of course, growing up in America, in Washington, D.C., I've seen a little bit of everything, right? I've seen what each system does well, where each one lacks. And after you watch this video, I think you'll have a much better picture of what basketball is around the globe and how we can keep building it. And I do have some notes down, but honestly, I'm just gonna kind of go off the top of the dome for most of this. So hopefully this makes sense to you. Also, if you are an international player or an American player, but especially an international player, and you want to come train with us or play AAU with us in Miami this summer, check out that link in the description. It is a phenomenal time. I promise you, it's priceless. Okay, now let's get to it. So first off, let's talk infrastructure, right? When we look at the American game versus the European game, by the way, I say European, every single country is significantly different. I know this, I've experienced this, but imagine how long it would take me to compare the Serbian system with the French system, with the Spanish system, with the UK. So I'm just gonna make a big umbrella statement here, sorry. But anyways, both sides have significantly different structure behind how players come up in the system and develop. Now, in my opinion, most American players develop more from their environment. Honestly, less so from the coaching that they have, but more so because there are more opportunities to play. Any rec center, park that they go to, they can just find people to play with, and usually pretty good people to play with. You have high levels of competition because there are just more basketball players, thus more good players. So growing up, you're constantly playing against new good players. You're traveling around the country or around your region to play pretty good players. And it's hard to do that in the European system where you don't have as many good players at the youth level because less people play basketball, more people play soccer, more people play handball. You also got more role models to learn from, right? Basketball in America in every city has at least some player who has gone on to play college or professionally or in the NBA. And players in America can see that, can see how they operate, can think, okay, there's a player that came from my town that looks like me, that, you know, came up in my upbringing and they've made it this far, I can do that too. They're also able to watch more college, NBA, not only because of time zones, but because of proximity. So you're seeing more and more easily able to go and apply those things. And I mean, look, if you drive around America, you're gonna see hundreds and hundreds of basketball hoops out in driveways or in alleys or streets. In Europe, you just don't see that as much. So American players, in my opinion, are developing mostly out of pure ability to play more, play against good players, to see and observe and emulate good players, and also because of the individualistic culture, which makes every player really want to be better than the next, which we'll talk about. Also, so many parents grew up in America playing basketball, so they have their kids start earlier, 5, 6 years old. In Europe, you rarely get players who start at 5 or 6 years old. So you have kids that just accumulate more basketball. But here's the thing, the infrastructure in America creates a culture of now. In other words, everyone wants their son, their daughter to be the best that they can right now. And it makes sense, right? There's a limited timeline. And this is why players reclass, because instead of playing against better players like they're expected to do in Europe, where playing up is the standard and is seen as the best thing to do for development, people want to be the best right now. So as an 8th grader who's staying back, you want to be able to kill those other 8th graders as much as possible. The fact that tournaments have to check birth certificates to see if players are playing down is insane, because we should want to play up. We should want to put these kids in situations where they aren't as good compared to everyone else, where they do get frustrated, where it does look a little bit ugly, because that's how they develop. And the European system understands that not only a little bit better, but a lot better. But the thing is, this is built into the American system, especially now the timeline is so much shorter. If you're an 18-year-old player and you don't have college offers, it automatically becomes that much tougher to even keep your career going. In Europe, the infrastructure is the opposite, right? I'll talk to coaches in Europe and they're like, yeah, he's, you know, still a very young player, 21. And my American mindset goes, 21, like you're at, maybe not now, you got 25-year-olds in college, but 21, usually you're at the end of your college career. Most players are literally ending their career there unless they're blessed enough to go overseas or play in the NBA. So you almost have to feel this urgency in America, which sucks, right? It really sacrifices long-term development for the bulk of players. For some players, it can help them, of course. And those are the ones that weed their way out and end up high-level college, NBA, professional. But for most players, this really hurts. And again, when we look at the European system, players stick at their club for longer, many of them for their entire childhood, whether that's contractual, loyalty, just because they don't feel a need to jump from club to get more exposure. They're gonna stick with that same club. That club is gonna see them on a longer term scale. And again, this is built into the system where if you develop a player from 12, 13 years old in your club, if they become really good, you end up getting them to that pro level, and then you can transfer them and get a buyout. So you can make direct money from developing a player. If not, maybe they stick around, they play for your pro team, they kind of move up the ranks, they're a valuable asset to your club. So coaches, players, parents are able to look on this longer timeline where if you're 18, you still have some years to develop. So you don't have to rush, you don't have to sell out for exposure, you don't have to leave to go and play more minutes on another team automatically. Let alone if you're 12 years old, you have no need to do this. It's a longer timeline. On top of this, players are encouraged to play up. Clubs are constantly looking to bring their young guys up and put them in pro practices and even games. This helps a ton, and this is why college players that come over from Europe are often so prepared, because not only are they used to a man's game, they're also used to acting like a professional. They're used to the business side. And on top of this, structurally, the European system has a true off-season. There is no AAU. Depending on your country, you're gonna play 3x3 in the off season. In some countries, they have school versus club, and they're kind of chill leagues in the off season. But most players are developing, they're resting, they're resetting their mind. The season is pretty long, right? Most seasons internationally go from September to April even. So it's not like a quick high school season where it's just like, December to February. So you're still getting a ton of experience. You're playing a real season. You're getting one game a week usually. And as a result, every single game and every single minute within every single game matters more, because you don't have 12 months where, oh, we lost in high school, we can go to AAU and have fun. And plus, in AAU, or even in high school, if you lose a game, you know that you'll probably have a game in AAU, of course, that next day, and in high school, a couple days later. So I've noticed that American players put way less weight into every game. And plus, since there are so many games, it's not about games being bad. I think games are great. You need to learn how to win to get experience. But since us as Americans have that culture of now, we're only focused on performance. There's no room for messing up, for losing a game, because you're looking to develop. And also, you spend all your time and all your attention preparing for those games instead of actually improving. But also keep in mind here that most European players can only get in the gym a few days a week. They come into their team practices maybe 3 days a week. Of course, the elite teams are in there every day, but most clubs are only in there a couple days a week practicing. Yeah, they can try to scrap together some gym time to get in their own work, but honestly, from what I've seen, that rarely happens. So American players are able to spend a lot more time in the gym, which leads me to the next conversation here. Skills training versus practice, or a balance of them both. Again, typically the American schedule is during the season, you have all team practices where all you're trying to do is prepare for the next game, prepare as a team. Then you go to the off season and you have AAU, so you have a couple practices a week. Usually they're not really that serious from the thousands of AAU practices that I've seen. Because there's so much inconsistency, you can't really learn, you can't really develop in those. Then you have skills training, where it's more individual focused. On the European side, again, not only do European players get less gym time for the most part because there aren't as many facilities, but two, the idea of skills training just isn't as accepted yet on a wide scale. So this is why American players typically, from an individual skill standpoint, will blow European players out of the water. But hear me out here, European players on the other hand, of course, cherish their practice time more. The coaches learn to be more efficient with their practice time. They teach the game more. And if European players are pretty damn good with this infrastructure, less gym time, less access, less skills training, and American players are in the gym every single day doing skills training, if not 2-3 times a day, that shows you that the style of development or the weight behind the things that are truly important may be a little bit off. American players and trainers spend so much time thinking individually that they don't build the IQ that is so important to learn how to play in a team game. I know it sounds cliche, I know this is a narrative that's going around, but it's true. I've seen it. You watch a 14-year-old player from Iceland and then a 14-year-old player from, I don't know, Kansas City, and the player in Kansas City is gonna have everything in the world in their toolbox, but so do thousands and thousands of other players in America, whereas the kid from Iceland is gonna know how to play basketball, make the right reads, have a good amount of skill, maybe not as much, they don't have as deep of a toolbox, but it doesn't matter because they've built the things that apply to the actual game. Now, this isn't to say that individual skill doesn't matter. Trust me, if you go to any league in the world internationally, the small guard or the point guard or really the scorers, the best players on those teams are gonna be American for the most part. But that's the thing. In America, we create really good star players, lead players. In Europe, they create really solid players in general. They may not be the superstars, and I know this is ironic considering probably 3 of the top 5, whatever you want to call it, of the top players in the NBA are European. But again, this is also a structural thing where in Europe, if you're a good, solid role player, you can have a 15-year career playing in your local domestic league. In America, really the only shot that you have is being good enough to the point where you can play at a Division I and then move on to the professional level, move on to the NBA or overseas hoops, and you have to be top 1% to get there. So everyone's trying to get to that top 1%. Next component of this is not structural, but cultural. American society is very individualistic. We want the American dream. Everyone's ambitious. It's the norm to wake up super early and work all day and try to make as much money for yourself as you can. European cultures, on the other hand, are way more collectivist. They promote not only the collective first, but also just quality of life. Neither one is better. I would say the European culture is definitely better for longevity, but in terms of people who are ambitious and they want to go get it, the American culture has something special there. Most Europeans make fun of it, but a lot of them come over to America and they really enjoy being able to express themselves from an ambition standpoint. So again, what does this do? Well, individualistic culture creates individualistic players, players who have very high individual skills, but usually don't play well with the collective. Whereas European cultures create collectivist players, right? They are very good at playing team basketball, making decisions in the context of team basketball. And then you have the players that combine both. Hopefully, you're starting to see where all this is going, that a combination of both of these, where you have that collectivist mindset, where you're able to buy in to the team, to the collective, but also have a little bit of that dog, that individualistic mentality in you. Those are the players that get really, really, really good. And that can come from both sides, America or Europe. It just takes being willing to have a mix of both. And this is why you see so many American players that go over to Europe. Some of them fade out because they don't embrace the collectivist component of this. The ones who really succeed and thrive and maximize their potential are the ones who learn how to think a little bit more collectively. You cannot think like you were thinking in America when you go play overseas basketball. Also consider what they watch here, right? Most players in Europe, of course, watch the NBA. Everyone watches the NBA, but they're also seeing their domestic league, right? If you're a young player growing up in France, you're gonna be watching French hoops, pro, U21, U18. So you're seeing a different style, a more collective style of basketball, and your perception of what basketball is more collective. It's not only the NBA, which is simply, for the most part, individual or more individual basketball. I love the NBA, trust me. I think it's way less individual than most people think. But nonetheless, that's a players league versus in Europe, it's a teams league. Also, think about how many players grow up playing soccer. Not only does this diversify their movement patterns and help them see certain patterns tactically on the court better, which I believe is a huge special component of the European basketball culture, but also in soccer, even the best players in the world cannot go 1-on-11. In basketball, the best player can't, of course, go 1-on-5, but they can go ISO and score on people. So you grow up with the idea that, hey, we have to do this together because it's 11-on-11 and I, the one guy, cannot beat the 11. Versus if you only play basketball, you're like, okay, well, this is doable. Also, while we're on that topic, I do find it very interesting that while we do seem to label European cultures, European basketball players as playing more sports, typically Americans actually play more sports in my experience. They sample more when they're growing up. Every kid plays soccer, some baseball, some football, basketball. And I would say most players in Europe actually specialize around 14 years old in basketball. And in America, you got both ends of the spectrum. You got the kids who do everything, and you got the kids who specialize from age 8, right? And that is not good. Now, going back to the different styles of basketball, it's important to realize the two styles are quite different. We always say American basketball is faster, but what that really is full court pace, right? There's more transition. We get up the court super fast. We try to create early advantages, get early shots. It's not for everyone, of course, but typically players are better athletes, stronger, faster, and as a result, the game ends up being and feeling faster. In Europe, though, I would argue that there's a different type of pace, half-court pace. Decisions are made quicker, the ball gets flung around, you're better playing in dominoes or keeping the ball moving around after an advantage. And again, neither one is better or worse. European basketball typically looks a little bit better tactically, whereas American basketball looks a little bit better from an individual creativity standpoint and speed and getting up and down and being flashy. So when we have players come over from Europe and play with our American players, you'd be surprised at how good each of them get at the other style in 2-3 weeks. And once you're exposed to it, for example, we have a ton of players that come over from France. Then they go back and they play U21 or U18 in France, and you can see them pushing the ball well, playing well through contact, and really integrating some of this into their game, while our American players, who are fresh off of 2-3 weeks with European players, go into their seasons and play really quality team basketball. So it's a nice little cross-pollination. Now, I mentioned creativity a little bit earlier, so I want to talk about one last quick cultural thing. In America, I believe we have more room for creative expression. We're a very capitalist society, right? We're constantly looking to innovate, come up with new ideas. You have a ton of entrepreneurs because we're always thinking about these things. We're always thinking about how we can be better and how we can innovate. In Europe, I'm not saying that's not there, but there is less room for creative expression. So many coaches in Europe that I've experienced really hold their players back in terms of individual creativity. The tactical creativity is 1000% there, and that's why you see concepts from Europe make their way over to the NBA and trickle down in America all the time. But in terms of individual creativity, in other words, what can you do with the ball, right? Developing different types of finishes, expressing yourself more, and coming up with different moves and solutions on the court. This is something where I definitely think European coaches should buy into a little bit more, because it really doesn't hurt the individual. It's only when you allow that creativity to be expressed in the wrong way, when players haven't worked on it enough, and when it hurts the team environment, when this actually is negative, but it doesn't have to be. Also, in terms of the early days here, in Europe, mini basket is the standard. Players are not playing a grown man's game with a size 7 basketball and a 10-foot hoop from age 8. They're playing mini basket, even sometimes up to 13 years old. So they're playing on a lower hoop with a smaller basketball. And what this does goes past the shooting mechanics. Typically in America, we actually build better shooters simply because we have more access to basketball and everyone needs to be able to shoot. Again, individual skill matters more, but it's deeper than that with mini basket. It allows more degrees of freedom on finishes, right? You can do more with the basketball. On passes, you can make more creative passes because you can control the ball. And most important, tactically, it opens up more space. Players at age 9 can shoot from further out because they're playing with scaled down equipment, which opens up more spacing for them, which allows more cutting, allows them to learn patterns of the game that are representative of the game that they will be playing, not just super compact basketball simply because nobody can shoot, nobody's spaced out, and everyone's in one big clump around the rim. And also there's less pressure to win, which is massively important here. In mini basket, there's no rankings. Parents don't want their kids being the best kid in the neighborhood or the city at 7, 8 years old. They just want to develop, have a good time, try new things. And this is a huge component of what I've seen in European development. And then lastly is the governance. In the US, there is no central governance. Yes, we have USA basketball, but in reality, what does USA basketball actually do for grassroots hoop? I would argue not nearly enough. And I know it's not because of USA basketball for the most part. It's because they just don't have enough power. Again, we live in a capitalist society. But what this ends up in is anything goes. Anyone can run events. Anyone can rank players. Anyone can coach. You don't need certifications for things. There are no quality control measures at tournaments. Anything goes. In Europe, everything is governed by federations. Now, most of the time, these federations are led by people who are old, outdated. They don't know much about hoops. So it ends up being better, but not that much better. But there are some really good federations. And either way, just the fact that there's central governance, the fact that there's actual coaches courses that must be taken. Trust me, I've done the USA basketball course because, we got to do it for AAU. It's terrible. It teaches you nothing. And nobody actually does it. In Europe, if you actually want to be a higher level coach, you need to go through coach's education and serious coach's education. And regardless of what you think about what's in that coach's education, just being there and putting your time, money, and energy into this pushes you to learn and to grow as a coach. Versus in America, anybody can pick up a ball and coach. And again, in Europe, everything, whether it's tournaments, leagues, clubs, events, everything is overseen by the government, which actually allows people to be held accountable, quality control to happen. And to me, this is huge. So, in conclusion here, there's definitely a lot of stuff that I forgot. And if you're still here, I know you're probably wondering, well, which one's actually better? But to me, it's not about which one's better. Both produce really good players. America is always going to produce an insane amount of talent, but they're also going to produce lower IQ basketball players. It's going to be a more painful experience for the bulk of basketball players who have to deal with all the BS of youth basketball versus the European system, which produces smarter basketball players for the most part, better role players, I would argue. It allows players to play for longer and to have a healthier relationship with basketball, but there's not as much access. You don't get as much individual skill. Obviously, the play styles is different, all the things that we talked about. And what my goal has become after seeing all of this in person and experiencing this, going through all of it, is to merge the two systems in the best way possible. It'll never be perfect, But for example, what we do with Adapt Academy, even our local athletes, we try to pull things from the European system to implement into that. But we also don't want to leave out the benefits of AAU and more skills training and all the things that are positive about American basketball. So what I would challenge you to do, whether you are a player, coach, parent, fan, start thinking about how you can just do something small to implement something from the other side into your culture. And I promise you, this is what we need to do to push basketball forward at all levels.